Wow. Good afternoon, and well, thank you for listening out there. This title, which is up there, a little weird, so I'll explain it. I want to look at the topic from three angles: the context of what I do in this space, the context of what may emerge, and then the implications of our collective work, not just my sector, but us as a technology industry. And I want to look at what's good, what I feel is worrying, and then see if there's any conclusions to draw from that. I chose the word hybrid. It's defined as a thing made by combining two different elements. In my case, in our case, it means the physical and digital lives and our experiences within. I quite like this quote by one of the visionary writers, obviously, that's led the direction of travel, quite often looking ahead of us. There's many layers in here that on its own could take up the entire day's exploration. But for now, what I'm hoping to do is to encourage an inkling of thought. I love the multi-screen world I inhabit. It is enabled, it's livened, it's encouraged me on a daily basis. Last year, for those of you here, we spoke about stories being told, layered, and exposed across more than 9 platforms. To put my colleagues and myself and our sector in context, we create experiences that start to deliver on the promise of many of these virtual dimensions. We help tell stories for the purposes of learning, sensing, experiencing, entertaining, informing. You've seen many examples of these, taking you on a hike virtually, taking you to Mars on a bus, putting you on the set of Game of Thrones. An example which I thought would show some of this is a broadcaster who currently is exploring what we all might have in our sitting rooms in 5 years' time.
Fans hold their breath. Here comes Milner.
Oh, what a save!
That's one example on the entertainment side. On the more serious,
the White House is the people's house, and
we could be sitting in the White House, last year's version. We could be seeing places, we could be seeing some of the big issues in terms of the visuals that are going on, not just the words.
And what we wanted to do was
one of the most beautiful.
And on a more trivial basis, on a weekend, we all like to have a weekend away. If you're in Northern Europe, you begin to think about where you're going to go. And this is the way in which we can begin to explore where we want to go and experience life. I don't know, many of you, if you've seen Black Mirror. If you haven't, it's a British, quite black, satirical show. I think the 3rd series has ended up on Netflix, but this is an amazing visionary writer who's put the show together. And it's sort of set in today, and it's set in tomorrow. It's all the technologies that are sort of around, and it's quite freaky. It's very funny, but it's a sense of the digital world overlaying the physical. I thought actually I would then deep dive a bit more into the digital space. I was surprised that when I listened to the venture guys earlier talking about where to invest, and the word augmented wasn't in that, it was all AI. For me, I'm seeing a race for what I believe is the next fundamental space, augmented space. The space where digital overlays our real world and combines to enhance our experience through constant access. If we look back to the 70s and the 80s, lines of code enabled space travel, guided missiles. The 90s and 2000s were the mouse, wireless, incredible processing power, which made cyberspace a reality. For me, the next decade, the next 20 years, is how we fill air with augmented material, augmented lives. For example, driven by data, driven by algorithms, driven by motives, which, as we're beginning to see, are not always apparent. So let me give some examples of things we can do and will do over the next 5 years. For those of you who are lucky to visit the MoMA Picasso exhibition a couple of years ago, 140 sculptures, first time ever together, will never be again together. We could have put people going around, instead of the audio guide, they could have had the augmented guide. They could have been in the junkyard where he collected the rubbish to make the sculptures. You could be in the studio with him. More importantly, to have recorded this one-off experience meant that it was a record. It would be access for those who couldn't visit. It would be access for scholars, be access for students, access for children, for 50 years, for 100 years, on something that will never be together again. In broadcasting, we'll obviously be adding layers to our television content. Our days will be anticipated with information in the air. For those of us whose musical heroes have passed away this past year or two, we will be able to feel their presence in a way that is only matched by the original live experiences. In terms of spectacle, our theatrical outings will include characters sitting next to us, fantastical props occupying vast spaces like this, ceremonies layered with complexities. In the world of learning, all levels will be brought to life. Teaching content will be made accessible for every nation, every age group, every economic segment in society. So we do have the potential for genuine equalization of childhood learning experiences. And then finally, the concept of discovery is going to be as big, as wide, as deep as your curiosity wants. And not just, obviously, through a search engine, but knowing where you are and who you are, and that'll be your experiences. So for me, that weird title at the beginning, hybrid reality, to the left-hand side, is sort of part of the last few minutes. The more important bit is the bit after the colon, the bit that's about humanity. Digital humanities, a new learning branch in universities, is bringing together computer sciences with the humanities to give us insights to the issues facing the world. Because technology drives the advances, but humanity provides the values and ethics by which we live our lives. The humanities are what makes us decent human beings. Earlier in the day, I was listening to some of the talks, and the general mood, the trend that I'm noticing emerging, is a concept of being unsettled. Unsettled about the contract that we appear to have entered into, the choice we made to accept free as the currency of the internet, the consequences of accepting the concept that we don't have the right to privacy, or at least we've signed it away. And it's incredibly difficult, generally, to reverse this. As a parent, I find myself talking about the price of privacy for millennials, the way my parents talked to me about the irreversible consequences of a tattoo. It's ironic that the millennial generation has embraced giving up privacy and tattoos as the statement of life and expression. The unsettling also seems to be coming to things like the community is realizing that there are issues about not paying a fair share of tax, about receiving investment from questionable sources, not accepting the responsibility of the disruption. Disruption often caused by funds that enable below-cost operations. Not accepting responsibility for those hurt by thoughtlessness. Using free speech to block market balancing initiatives. The last 20 years, the post-Reagan period in the 20th century, saw competition severely hampered, saw the accumulation of market share that led to price rises and lower employment. The new industries that we're all creating are about to unleash a second generation of job losses. The first was obviously manual workers. AI and its manifestations will devastate graduate and office communities. So the mirror that I'm hoping to hold up today is, are we taking the responsibility to understand the impact of innovation, the cost of innovation, the reach of innovation? We're reading about this all the time. Just before I talked last year, my wife and I had our first baby. And those of you in the audience who are new parents know the impact, the sheer scale of responsibility thrust on the day of birth. I find myself walking the canals in London wondering about his future and his very grounding mindset if you're a CEO in a technology business. And I have a genuine sense as I do this that I love the wonder in life. I love the fact that I meet new people, the learning that's still ahead of me, the pride and pleasure in my colleagues' achievements, the richness of our family lives. All of these are enhanced by the two parallel planes, the hybrid, the physical and the digital. So today we're defining our future as a community. I've tried to give some sense of what's exciting me. As I build a business, I'm trying to find revenue lines I can be proud of. I am responsible to my colleagues and their families to be profitable, but I'm also being held to account by them for the impact of the profit. So if I could draw together, I'm going to conclude in a conflict. I'm optimistic and I'm cautious. Let me give you an example.
I'm really passionate about climate change. I'm worried that there won't be enough fresh water for everybody.
I want to make sure that we're able to have a self-sustaining environment.
My interest is to find a cure for breast cancer because my mom had it. Whoa!
Oh. Whoa. The cracks are probably where the water is.
Seeing stuff like this,
I think I want to be able to help do that.
it makes me feel like unstoppable.
I'm cautious because there's so much to be done. For those of you who have seen the full film, knows that the second part delivers the bad news, that only 6% of women will graduate as STEM graduates, which is clearly not good enough. And then, as we've seen, we don't always treat them very well. So that's an example of things that I'm cautious about. But I'm optimistic because there isn't humanity 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. Humanity is resilient, and the possibilities are open to each family, no matter where we are, which continent we live in. So we all have an obligation in this whole to enable this, to remember that as a community, we have yet to take the responsibilities of what disruption brings, what our work unleashes, what tools we provide the unscrupulous. So my parting thought is, be thoughtful. Thank you.